Surviving Hurricane Helene, Harrowing Accounts from the Eye of the Storm. Story 1. Living in South Tampa, Florida, I lost nearly everything, including my car, to Hurricane Helene. I stayed in my apartment until Monday. I'm in Zone A, which means mandatory evacuation. I took everything I had left and what could fit in my car. I had to leave some things behind. My cat and I are in a hotel now, hopefully safe. I'm not entirely sure what my next move is or where to go. It's a terrifying, confusing, exhausting time. Story 2. I'm a resident of St. Petersburg. Honestly, the evacuation wasn't horrible. I ended up going to Orlando, still in the storm's path, but should be much less intense. The worst part of all of this is the dread. There's such a heavy grief and sadness in St. Petersburg, and it was really hard to leave, knowing I might be coming back to a disaster. I might come back and find my whole home and all my things gone. I'm glad I'll be safe and physically sound, but I'm already mourning the city I love so much and all the beautiful people who live there. Story 3. The dread truly is the worst. Hurricane Florence hit my hometown in 2018. I was away at college thinking I would never see my childhood home again. My parents were leaving for a trip to Korea, so they wouldn't know the damage until they got back 2 weeks later. My dad said that the morning they left for the airport, he almost threw the coffee pot onto the floor, thinking it wouldn't matter because the house was going to be destroyed anyway. We ended up with zero damage to the house, but we were one of the lucky ones, sending good vibes your way. Story 4. I live in Tampa, Zone A. My husband and I evacuated out of state with our dogs and important items. I parked my car at my friend's parking garage on the 6th floor to avoid flooding, and we drove my husband's car out. We left around 4:30 a.m. on Tuesday, so there was no extensive traffic, some pockets of slowdown, but no real gridlock, luckily. I'm glad we're safe, but I feel sick to my stomach about what's going to happen to our community. The uncertainty is unbearable. Story 5. This one feels very different. I'm inland by Orlando, so my experience has been more people heading this way. Resources are strapped. No gas, shelves empty. It's pretty bad. The worst part is the confusing information. It's hard to differentiate accurate information. This storm is moving quickly and has yet to de-intensify. It would be really nice for this thing to slow down. This storm is very scary. You can feel it. I pray for the West Coast and everyone in Milton's path. Let us all hope for this storm to de-escalate as expected. Stay safe, everyone, and listen to official messaging. Do not play games with this. A Category 543 is no joke. A Category 1 can be no joke. Story 6. I remember the endless wait during Hurricane Irma. Every minute felt like an eternity. The winds roared, and the sound of branches hitting the windows was terrifying. My family and I huddled in the basement, counting the minutes until the storm passed. The power went out, leaving us in total darkness. The waiting was the worst, not knowing what we would find when we emerged. When the storm finally passed, we cautiously climbed the stairs. The devastation was immense, but we were grateful to be safe. Story 7. Hurricane Michael hit us with unimaginable force. My family and I hunkered down in the bathroom, the only place that seemed safe. We could hear the winds howling and the house shaking. Water started to seep in, and the level rose quickly. We fought to stay calm, keeping the kids occupied so they wouldn't be scared. Those were the longest hours of my life. When the hurricane finally passed, we emerged cautiously, finding our house partially destroyed. We had lost so much, but we had survived. Story 8. During Hurricane Katrina, my elderly neighbor was trapped in her house. The water rose quickly, and it was clear she needed help. In the middle of the storm, I ventured to her house with a rope and a life jacket. The darkness was absolute, and the noise of the wind and water was deafening. I managed to reach her window and help her out. It was an exhausting effort, but I got her to safety. That midnight rescue is something I will never forget. Story 9. After Hurricane Harvey, returning home was a surreal experience. We had evacuated in time, but coming back meant facing the unknown. Our street was unrecognizable, with debris everywhere. The anxiety grew with every step. When we finally reached our house, we found that the water had entered, destroying furniture and memories. The community came together to help us clean and rebuild, but the sense of loss was overwhelming. We learned to appreciate what truly matters and to stay strong in difficult times. Story 10. It was silent when the storm began. There were no howling winds or torrential rains, just an eerie stillness. We knew it was the calm before the storm. My family and I gathered in the living room, the tension palpable. The news had warned us, but nothing could prepare us for the deafening silence that preceded the chaos. As the storm hit, it felt like the world was ending. The roof rattled and windows shuddered. We clung to each other, hoping our home would withstand the fury. When it was over, the silence returned, but it was no longer comforting. It was the silence of loss and destruction. Story 11. During Hurricane Sandy, our family was stranded. The roads were flooded, and no one could get to us. We had lost power, and our food supplies were running low. Desperation set in as the storm raged on. Then, out of nowhere, a neighbor we barely knew came knocking. He had a small boat and offered to help us evacuate. It was a perilous journey through the flooded streets, but he got us to safety. That neighbor, who we had only exchanged pleasantries with, became our hero. His selflessness and courage are something we'll never forget. It restored our faith in humanity. Story 12. Hurricane Ike brought relentless waves crashing against our home. We lived close to the shore, and the storm surge was unlike anything we had ever seen. The water kept rising, and soon it began to infiltrate the house. We moved to the highest point, hoping it would be enough. The sound of the waves and wind was deafening. We were trapped with no way out, just praying the water wouldn't rise any higher. When the storm finally passed, the devastation was immense. Our home was nearly destroyed, but we were grateful to be alive. The sea had spared us, but it left a lasting mark. Story 13. After Hurricane Wilma passed, the silence was eerie. The once bustling neighborhood was now a ghost town. Trees were uprooted, roofs torn off, and power lines down. My family and I emerged from our safe spot, taking in the destruction. The calm after the storm was unsettling. We started the slow process of cleaning up, helping our neighbors who had lost even more than we had. The sense of community was strong, and we leaned on each other for support. Despite the devastation, the storm had brought us closer together. Story 14. During Hurricane Rita, we were more worried about the wind and rain than anything else. But it was the unseen dangers that caught us off guard. As the water began to rise, so did the risk of electrocution. Power lines were down, hidden under the floodwaters. The realization hit us hard. We had to navigate our way to safety, avoiding not just the rising water, but also the hidden threats it carried. It was a harrowing experience, one that taught us to respect every aspect of a storm's power. Story 15. Hurricane Andrew was one of the scariest experiences of my life. We had decided to ride out the storm, thinking we were prepared, but as the winds picked up and the rain pounded, we realized we had made a mistake. At the last minute, we decided to evacuate. It was a frantic scramble to gather our things and get out. The drive was terrifying, with debris flying and roads flooding. We made it to a shelter just in time. Looking back, I realize how close we came to disaster. It was a narrow escape, one I will never forget. Story 16. In the wake of Hurricane Maria, our small community felt abandoned. Aid was slow to arrive, and we were left to fend for ourselves. The storm had devastated our homes, and the lack of resources made it even harder to recover. We banded together, sharing what little we had. The sense of being forgotten was overwhelming, but it also strengthened our resolve. We rebuilt our community, piece by piece, proving that even in the darkest times, hope and solidarity can prevail. Story 17. Hurricane Dorian was bearing down on us, and we were running out of time. Our elderly neighbor lived alone and had no way to evacuate. My husband and I decided to help. We packed her things, got her into our car, and drove to safety. It was a tense journey, with the storm raging around us, but we made it. She was so grateful, and it felt good to help. Sometimes, in the midst of chaos, small acts of kindness can make all the difference. She became like family to us after that experience. Story 18. I was only 10 years old when Hurricane Isabel hit. From a child's perspective, it was both terrifying and fascinating. The grown-ups were scared, which scared me even more, but there was also a sense of adventure. The power went out, and we used candles and flashlights. We all huddled together, telling stories to pass the time. When the storm passed, the damage was huge, but my childlike curiosity turned it into an exploration. We learned a lot about resilience and the importance of family. Story 19. Hurricane Hugo left our town in ruins. The destruction was total. Houses were flattened, trees uprooted, and lives upended, but what stood out the most was the unbreakable spirit of the people. We came together, not just to rebuild homes, but to rebuild lives. Volunteers from all over came to help. There was a sense of community and camaraderie that emerged from the disaster. It took months, but we rose from the ruins, stronger and more united than ever. The hurricane tested us, but it couldn't break us.